implementation could be the starting point. Those seem like areas where most people agree something needs to be done, even if the details differ.
I don't know, but can you write I guess a paper about this?
Sure, I can write a paper outlining the concept of a unifying bipartisan framework for long-term reforms. I'll focus on the
Sure,
need for
right?
consistent national goals, how it could work structurally, and the potential impact on unity. I'll also tie in examples like the UN's Sustainable Development Goals for inspiration and explore how such a system could be implemented in the US. Would you like me to start with a general introduction or focus on a particular issue as an example?
I'm not sure, but maybe I definitely. I mean, I guess starting out with how the UN has those shared goals, and then how we should sort of have such a thing, and a bipartisan effort, and then I guess talk about how we talked about in the beginning, with with how no matter what administration comes in, these efforts are still shared and tracked, and sorts of progress and whatnot.
Got it. I'll start by introducing how the UN's Sustainable Development Goals work as a global model for unchanging priorities. Then I'll connect that to the idea of creating a bipartisan reform agenda in the US, emphasizing the importance of continuity across administrations. I'll include how progress can be tracked, ensuring that each administration contributes rather than resets the effort. I'll write it up and keep it focused on the themes of unity and long-term planning. A framework for unity, the case for a bipartisan reform agenda in the US. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, offer a compelling example of how shared long-term priorities can guide progress across diverse stakeholders. These 17 global goals, ranging from eradicating poverty to addressing climate change, remain consistent over decades, serving as a roadmap for international collaboration. Each nation contributes to achieving these goals while adapting efforts to local contexts. This model of unchanging, measurable priorities could inspire a similar approach in the United States, a bipartisan reform agenda designed to unify the nation and ensure continuity across political transitions. Why the US needs a bipartisan reform agenda. In the US, the lack of a stable, long-term framework for national priorities often leads to a cycle of disruption. Each administration introduces its own vision, frequently.
So how would you sort of, I guess you would keep it, how would you sort of ensure that, like, that occurs? Like, if you're talking about immigration, I guess you find, so when you're making it, you sort of find the consensus of the right and the left, and then I guess you document that, like you document the consensus of the right and then the left and of why, and then you form the opinion, and then you document it so that later on in history they say, if somebody else says what the right has already said, say, well, we already, that was already discussed, and this is still the center. So I'm trying to figure that catalyst to still always reinvigorate that. Or if somebody says, well, that's an old thing. That's an old thing. I was like, well, they also said the sort of same thing 8 years ago. So then this is still the center, and we still go this way. That's what I'm trying to, I guess, say. So maybe have that. So what do you think about that?
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
Oh, I hate it when he does that. I'm thinking that in the future they'll be like, oh, so this is fine and this is all fine and dandy, but this is what they thought then, you know, or like, what if something would be created like this, you sort of do have this sort of you document the you document both sides, like what they like their opinions, and then you find the center, and so that if those opinions don't change in the future, it's still it still directs them to the center, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. You're saying that for something like this to work in the long term, it would need to document the original positions of both sides, the left, the right, and maybe even other perspectives, and then identify where the center lies at that time. That way, if future debates arise, people can see the historical reasoning behind the consensus and why the center was chosen as the guiding path. It creates a kind of institutional memory. So even if opinions evolve, there's a framework to return to that's grounded in evidence and shared intent. It's like anchoring the effort to the best collective wisdom of the time while leaving room for future adjustments without losing focus. That's a really thoughtful approach, like a dynamic but steady compass. Should I weave this concept into the paper?
I think that you should make it, if you can make it that primarily about it, I think that would be good. Like, because I see just like if they do that for 4 years and they're like, well, no, I think we have a better way to do this, so let's change it all entirely. So I think having that sort of that, yeah. So I think yes, put that into the paper. I'm not sure where you would put it. Maybe like after the introduction or something, or like you talk about having the shared bipartisan goals of reform, and then talk about the how it could change every 4 to 8 years, and then the reason why, and then and then mention, for this reason we would want to do this, which is what we were just talking about with documenting the positions, and then the center, and then I'm not sure where else you would sort of, I guess, and then yeah, I guess, and then picking up and leaving off, and mentioning how it no matter what sort of president or sort of thing, they still they go with the center. So yeah, I think that's a good paper. That
Got it. I'll rework the paper to center it around this concept. The flow will emphasize how the cyclical nature of administrations often disrupts long-term goals, and why documenting positions from both sides and anchoring reforms in the center creates stability. I'll weave in the idea that this approach ensures continuity even as administrations change, and explain how it fosters accountability and progress over time. It'll naturally tie back to the shared bipartisan goals, but the focus will be on frame.
I liked what he said. Anchoring progress, documenting. I think what your title is. I don't like the mentioning the UN goals. Like I guess like referencing it just one time, the UN Sustainable Goals. Maybe at the end of it or something, but the like I guess more defining what the UN shared goals are, like as far as not what they literally are, but like what that concept is, and then using it for America's bipartisan reform agenda. That doesn't change or flip or flop due to what candidate is in office. And then I'll yeah.
Got it.
I don't know.
Here's an updated version that touches on the concept of the UN's shared goals without diving too deep into specifics and keeps the focus on the bipartisan reform agenda for the US.